This is Lessons Learned, and I'm your host, Matt Kennard, CEO of Better Lesson. Join me as we dig in with visionary state and district level leaders who share our mission to support every K-12 educator in developing the next generation of resourceful, compassionate, and resilient learners. Lessons Learned is brought to you by Better Lesson. Let's get started. All right, welcome back. Season 2, Lessons Learned. We've had a bunch of great topics to cover this year. We're talking about the future of persistence and readiness. We're thinking about CTE, and there's a big topic that we can't get away from, which is AI, both for students and for educators. And I am really excited today. I am joined today by the founder of DeweyLearn, CEO and founder of DeweyLearn, and former chief learning officer at 2U, the CPO at Trilogy Education, also the CPO at Pearson Education. Luyen, it is great to see you. Glad to have you on board for the day.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
When we get into AI and we think about the world of where we're heading in education, I remember learning about DeweyLearn and the work that you all are doing to think about using AI as a part of the professional learning program, but also as a way to think about building skills for students, building mastery as well. It felt natural that we had to have a conversation about the intersection of AI and the work that you all are doing at DeweyLearn. So I wanted to start by just giving folks a chance to hear a little bit about what y'all are up to.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. We're super excited because we think that we've been able to use multimodal AI. So AI that not only, most of us interact today with AI systems, generative AI systems through text prompts, but multimodal really means interacting with AI through textual semantic content, but also through visual content, video, like we're on a video right now, but also what we call prosody. So speech tonality, speech inflection. So when you bring all those things together, it turns out that you can create AI systems that have really precise and deep insights about human understanding, human learning, human interaction. And we're unleashing that now in a variety of applications in education, including things like classroom observation.
It's funny, we talk a lot about AI as something that I think folks look at with a mixture of this is the savior, right? And this is, Skynet, T1000 coming down. Eventually, all of our kids are just going to be locked in rooms with computers and a proctor walking around and make sure they're doing work. And I think that the reality of AI is that it's going to be neither of those things. It's really going to be a tool that enhances our ability to differentiate learning and provide both supports to educators, but also supports and guides for kids as they are thinking about building skills mastery and moving forward. And I think that's one of the things that excites me the most about your take, which is it's a neutral, right? AI is a tool. It's a tool that we use to do certain things. As you think about, where we are today, you're now working in AI, you've come from a long list of fantastic and influential places. Kind of what got you into this work, and what is, kind of what has brought you to this table at DeweyLearn? Because I think there's a lot to that history that has helped inform the work as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. My heart and my soul are in the classroom. I'm a teacher, but by training, and I think that's really my DNA. But I'm also grew up, in an age where technology proved that it could transform our world in very profound ways. I'm old enough that I was one of the first people with a PC at that time. We didn't even call it a PC. I had a TRS-80 Model 1 with 16K of RAM. And
for any educator who's like under the age of 30 listening right now, the computing power to open one of your apps would have befuddled this thing. And by that, I mean, an Atari Pong app.
Yeah, we didn't have cloud storage. We had a cassette tape drive that we stored data on. And even then, I would stay up all night. Exactly. I would stay up all night programming because I realized that this was going to transform the reality that we all lived in, it was a really transformative experience. And um, I feel like I'm living through that same age now. I'm 58 years old, and I'm having the same experience I had when I was 15 years old. And it's a very powerful experience. And not to say there haven't been massive advances in computing and technology. I mean, I actually physically helped connect our school when I was a teacher in 1990 to the internet. So there have been massive revolutions along the way, but something about this feels profoundly different. um, so anyway, I've been involved in this intersection between education, technology, and product for a long time. And going back to, as I mentioned, early 1990s, I really saw how technology could transform a learner's relationship with learning. And that was exciting to me. The notion that a textbook no longer had to be the intermediary between a learner and the reality that they were learning about, that they could have a much more dynamic and engaging experience. And so I've committed really my life's work to exploring that possibility, that the potentialities there. And So this is just the latest manifestation of all of that in many respects.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly there. And I think there's something interesting, at least from my perspective, of when we think about AI and we think about observation and multimodal observation, right? Humans are notoriously bad observers of their environment, right? We're subject to bias. There are things that we see or don't see, right? I mean, the whole dancing bear phenomena is a real thing. And if you're not there, please go Google dancing bear in the middle of the room and have a lot of fun with it. Try it, with your friends at a party. But AI opens up pathways to emotional resonance and observation and understanding that I think are unique aspects to how we can apply the technology. In the same ways that as we over time have been able to do like textual analysis of what people are looking at, right? And that's taken us leaps and bounds in multiple fields, including things like if we look at historic text, was it great forces or was it great individuals? Did people feel the forces around them? When we are able to do large scale textual analysis of what's happening at the time, it's been really interesting to see some of those things start to come to life in ways that honestly we would never be able to connect. And a classroom is a microcosm of that. When you're able to now include facial expression and body language, as a teacher, you see some of that, but you don't see all of it. And even as a 30-year teacher, you don't see all of it, but you know what to do when you do see it. Um, so I think that this like current state of AI in education is really interesting because we're finally getting to the point where it can be such an additive piece to both understanding and differentiation, and I think that Dewey, you all built some really interesting pieces to support that. I don't know if you can go into that. I'd love to just hear more about, for those early adopters, what are the benefits they're seeing today?
Yeah, sure. So let me just sort of describe what it is DeweyLearn does, and then I'll talk about some of the value that we've been able to produce out of it. So DeweyLearn is able to take any recording or representation of human interaction. That could be a Zoom recording of a live online classroom. It could be an it could be an iPhone recording from a, iPhone on a tripod in the corner of a physical classroom, maybe with a wireless lavalier mic, and a mic in the middle of the room. Any recording of actual learning, whether it's physical or virtual, and from that input can deliver really, really deep insights about what's actually happening. We started by really thinking about how can we help instructors, educators, and provide them with feedback about their own practice. How well are our students engaging with or mastering the content that they're trying to deliver? What's the nature of the collaboration in the classroom? What's the sort of response to an instructor's tone of voice, the logical reasoning throughout a lesson. But what we quickly realized was that we actually built a system that could also understand how the learner was processing and sort of consuming the learning as well, and what their attitudes were about it, their engagement level, their attitudes with each other, the level of collaboration, and even to the point where DeweyLearn can now, from these videos, understand what strategies work for a particular learner, for a particular teacher, for a particular group. So we're doing a variety of in 2025. We just launched the company at the beginning of this year, and so we've been kind of piloting quietly with a number of different partners in K-12, higher ed, and in workforce learning. Um, we're working with, for instance, a major charter school network. They have used DeweyLearn to record their master fifth grade math teachers
Right. What does
and
good look
provide
like?
right,
What does
exactly.
good look
And
like? Love
they
that.
asked them a very simple. They asked DeweyLearn a very simple thing. What are the 3 to 5 highest leverage techniques that these master teachers use to drive success? And they can't be based on something that is unique to the individual. They have to be things you could teach. And then this fall, they did that in the spring. In this fall, they're recording their developing teachers in 5th grade math. And DeweyLearn now has a rubric through which to say to those developing teachers, here are these high leverage moves. Here's how your practice compares to the way that these master teachers teach. And our theory with this charter school network is this is going to drive an acceleration of the development of high competency among these middle school math teachers.
You'll also solve, I think, one of the hardest questions, which is, we talk a lot about people being born to be a teacher. You can be born to be many things from a talent perspective. It is still hard work to get it right. And giving someone an exemplar of what good looks like, not only from a outcomes basis, right? And not even just a verbal basis, but seeing that teacher move through a room, seeing the physical presentation that they give, being able to think about mirroring and copying, which is what we do, for a sports fan, right? If you've gone and watched Shaquille O'Neal tape, you know how he backs an opponent down and he dunks. Well, that is a footwork question. That's a physical body question. That's a technique question, right? Same thing when watching someone paint or do anything else. Right? Bob Ross got an entire generation of us to figure out how to make happy little trees because we got to watch him. But seeing the physical touch that went into that, the presence, it makes it such a live experience compared to you should try this in your classroom tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think even for our great teachers, there's so much that goes under the surface, unnoticed about our learners. And, you mentioned bias before. It's not even so much that our teachers are consciously biased. It's that as humans, we can only pay attention to what we can pay attention to. And DeweyLearn and these AI systems, they pay attention to everything with complete equanimity. If you have a camera in a classroom or you have a Zoom recording and there are 30 faces, 30 students raising their hands or not raising their hands, making comments, asking questions, it's observing all of that with equanimity. I had, as a school administrator and a master teacher myself, I've probably done 1,000, 2,000 classroom observations over time. And I know even when I was really on my game, I could only focus at most on 1 or 2 faces and voices at a time. DeweyLearn is able to focus on everything. So it reveals the subtle truths about what's happening in your classroom with an equanimity and a lack of bias that I think then allows you as a teacher to make decisions in a more equitable way.
One thing this brings up, and I think we hear these questions a lot, are how does this feel practically or ethically manageable in a classroom? And I know that that's a hard question for a lot of folks to answer. And there's, whether it's CCPA or GDPR, there's been a lot of work to support COPA and FERPA in classrooms. As you think about like ethical use, practical use, how do you think about that conversation as folks are thinking about adaptation? Because this can be a scary, kind of a scary wild, wild west as folks think about it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's this is a conversation that we need to be having as a society. It's not about us as DeweyLearn. It's not about one company. What I've found is that when you start the conversation with a potential partner with, "Hey, we've got an AI system. We're going to film everybody in a classroom, and we're going to tell you something," you never get past that sentence, right? When you start the conversation with, "Let us show you the kinds of insights that we can deliver for your practitioners," then their natural response is, "What do we need to do to make that happen?" And I think, this is like any new technology. Um, this is a compact between those of us who produce the technology, who have these products and services, and the customers who use it. And I think, there are negative examples of that in history, right? If you look at what the social media platforms did was, as Tim Cook famously said, they made the consumer the product, right? We thought we were getting something for free, and we were actually giving away our identities, our privacy, our relationships. And the real customer were the companies that were buying that data from the platforms. I think we as providers need to be incredibly transparent with our customers about what the value proposition is, the benefit, who is the beneficiary, what is, where, who's the customer, what's the product. But I think if you do that in a really transparent and really compelling way, um, the barriers and the restrictions around some of these issues starts to fall. And obviously, from a client compliance and technical compliance standpoint, we're very, very conscious of making sure that our systems abide by all the applicable laws and regulations. But I think it goes beyond that. I think it's a value proposition question.
Yeah, I like that. I think professional learning in many respects is maybe the easy on ramp for a lot of folks because, and I'll bring it back to something we talked about earlier in the charter school network example you brought up. I've been in digital core curriculum. I've obviously been in professional learning for a long time. And there's one persistent question that comes from folks when they think about implementation of high quality instructional materials. I can see their quality. I can see what you're trying to get me to do. Conceptually, I understand why it's a pedagogically sound approach. How do I either observe classrooms to make sure that it's being implemented with fidelity in the way that a teacher's operating, or as a teacher, feel prepared, particularly in my first couple of years of both teaching, or even if I've been teaching for a while, implementation of this new thing, to really be able to measure myself against good. And the reality is we don't have, for instance, an ability to observe in many respects a master teacher doing fifth grade illustrative mathematics, right? And understanding what that looks like. And this is what the world gives us, not only an opportunity to see it, but to map our own behavior to good. And I think that we know teacher quality is one of the only things that we've ever been able to truly measure to improve student outcomes. Teacher quality is enhanced when you can see how to do it. And I think that to me is like a very exciting thing for us to be able to focus on as you've worked with and talked to instructors and leaders. How have you gotten them over the fear of, well, I don't want them to just, people become automatons trying to do the thing that they saw. They'll have to bring their own thing to it. But like using that measurement without it feeling like it's punitive or an attempt to try and create a robot or drum people out, for performance.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way DeweyLearn works, when we work with a partner like this charter school network, we set up a rubric and a framework where a teacher will upload a recording of their classroom video, and then they'll get immediate feedback on, here's how you did against this rubric. Here are areas for improvement. But it's a chatbot with multimodal knowledge of what happened in the classroom. So you can ask it anything you want to at that point, and that's where it gets really interesting. Like the kind of initial report is just kind of the starting point. And I think about this a lot because when I was a first year teacher, and I thought I was a pretty darn good teacher, if I have to say so myself. But all I remember were the things that I screwed up. All I remember were the moments where something didn't quite work the way I intended it to. and I had no one to talk to about that. I was I first of all, embarrassed and felt too vulnerable to ask the experienced teachers, like, "What should I have done here?" Because I didn't wanna feel exposed. I went home and, my wife's a teacher. At the time, we weren't together, but even if she had been with me at that point, she wouldn't have known my kids. She wouldn't have known what I was teaching. So what we find is that these teachers discover with DeweyLearn, there's this chatbot down there, and you can say something like, "Hey, um, Luyen seemed to really, really be, engaged today. What was it that made him so interested? And why was he having that conversation with, so and so about whatever?" And you find that teachers have this incredible, uh, realization that they have a companion who's non-judgmental, but also all-knowing and omnipresent in their classroom. And all of a sudden, this doesn't become a judgmental report about their instruction. It becomes a co-pilot. And that's what we strive for.
That's the key right there. I think the idea that it's collaborative and an opportunity for folks to think through, um, what you used to go do in the old days when you'd go down the street to meet with, say, you go down the hallway and you go observe Mrs. Johnson, who's like, the best teacher, your section leader, and you just sit in the back and you observe a classroom, right? You just get to see it and then be able to interrogate against it with the full context of what you're trying to do. And I love that because now you can use your own kids, your own experience back and forth to do that. And I think that that's been interesting. One thing you mentioned there that is, I think, governance. I think that the states have a lot, districts and states have a lot to be able to do here. I think to also clear the way. Um, I think we probably have some archaic structures. How do you think about it when you're thinking about state leaders, federal leaders, district leaders, talking to them about AI in such a manner that they are allowing for this positive use to move forward?
Well, I think again that you have to lead with opportunity and then talk about the means to achieve that, right? It's strategy first, tactic second. And I think AI is going to disrupt and is already disrupting education in a lot of different ways. Not the least because the skills that we consider to be durable, long time career skills are in question now themselves. I was the chief product officer for a coding boot camp. We sold it for almost $1 billion in 2018. I don't think we could raise money for that company today because basic coding is being done by machines now. It's not being done by humans. So there's a sea change in the actual outcomes that educational institutions need to deliver to learners to make good on the social compact that educational institutions have with our population. And so I think that the real conversation that, if you start the conversation in the weeds of uh, GDPR and DSAs and and COPA and FERPA. Those are all incredibly important things, and we have to be mindful of them, and we have to adhere to the regulations and applicable laws. But I think there's a broader conversation here, which is what are the skills that learners are going to need to learn in order to be successful and competent in an AI era age, and how can AI help us to accelerate our ability to deliver those skills? And what are the laws, structures that should be in place to help to achieve that end? I think we have to flip the conversation around in the other direction.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think, there's the old saying, you gotta start where you want to finish. Right? And starting where you wanna finish really does require often, that type of foresight, and I think sometimes we don't use it, or especially in terms like AI. I think internet access was probably a very similar conversation, for those of you who might have been in higher ed when Wikipedia came out. Very small example, right? But the idea that a constantly refreshable internet-based encyclopedia might be better than an encyclopedia from 3 years ago. All right, not replacing original source material, but right might be useful when we think about long-term research. Which and by the way, we knew it was more accurate at that point. Um, every time we tend to approach it with fear, and I think this idea of instead saying like this is where this allows us to end up really will matter is important.
Yeah, and Matt, there's some analogies that I'm sure a lot of your listeners will already be aware of, but I'm old enough to remember when the graphing calculator was a huge threat
Yeah, 85 for
to
life.
us, right?
Yeah.
And teachers were said, "Over my dead body will I allow these things into the school." If you went to your typical school and said, "We're confiscating all of the graphing calculators from your students and from the school," you'd have a revolution on your hands. And the reason is not just because they were wrong, it's because teachers rethought what the actual curriculum could be if students had calculators at their disposal. And then we went through the same thing with the internet, as you mentioned. We went through the same thing with Wikipedia. Now, the issue here is that the AI sort of onset is far more accelerated than those previous revolutions, technical revolutions, technology revolutions. So, to give you an example, I was very involved early on in the 1990s and early 2000s with helping to wire schools to the internet. It took 10 years from the public availability of the internet for half the schools in the country to be wired to the internet. It took a decade for half the schools. It took less than 3 years for 90% of students to be using generative AI since its inception in the fall of 2022. We are in a timescale that's unlike anything, an adoption timescale we have never seen in human history. And what's kind of concerning about it is the students are ahead of the adults, in terms of this adoption curve, and it's kinda like we've handed students keys to cars without driver's ed, and I think it's not only a, you know, opportunity for educators to lean into this, it's a responsibility for them to get out in front of this because the students are already there.
But I mean, for anyone who has lived in a major city in a brownstone with steps, I hope you know the reason that those steps were there was so you would not be stepping into a street full of horse manure, right? And if we think about, we often talk about Moore's law and we talk about computing power, right? And that's fine. But the idea that we have never seen this pace of evolution at this rate, but we have seen this acceleration for a very long time since the Industrial Revolution, right? And I think that one thing that, if it gives anyone any comfort, right? If you were, for instance, dealing with whale oil in the late 1800s, the 1900s had a rough run for you. If you were horse and buggy manufacturers in 1897, 1903 is tough year for you, right? We have gone through these evolutions. And if you even think about, we were joking about punch card computers, right? That's the 60s and 70s at MIT. It's less than 50 years since we were doing that, right? And you hold enough computing power in your phone to have put a man on the moon in the 1960s like 50 times over, with like just that one device by itself. So I think that one thing that is interesting in what you're saying is, while our pace of change continues to accelerate, we've been going through accelerating pace of change for a long, long time. Our tools adapt faster. It's okay that they do. It's us recognizing that, our reach sometimes feels like it exceeds our grasp, but it always has been exceeding our grasp. And almost every good thing, and probably a lot of bad things that have happened in human history, come because that pace of change isn't going to change. So either we start to adapt or we die.
Yeah. Well, Matt, there's you talked about the second floor steps, the parlor floor steps for anyone who has lived in urban environments where you have houses that go back, brownstones that go back to turn of the century and the early mid 19th century, yeah, I mean, it was a different world, right? The automobile was seen as a great solution to the pollution of horse drawn transportation. When I was at Pearson, we had this incredible office on the Strand. It's where Winston Churchill walked out to see the Battle of Britain unfold at the Thames River. Right near there is a famous historic tunnel called the Blackwall Tunnel, which was the first tunnel that was built underneath the Thames River, and uh, it's got two tubes to it, and one tube you can see from one end to the other; it's completely straight, and the other one you can't see from one end to the other because it zigzags like this. And the reason for that is because when they built the tunnel initially in one direction, the major mode of transportation was horse-drawn carriage. And if horses could see past a very short part of the tunnel, they freaked out. By the time they built the return side of the tunnel, the automobile became the dominant mode of transportation, and so they just built it straight. And that's the world we're living in, is we're literally building the tunnels, and the bridges, from the present to the future while our reality is changing under our feet. And I think that is, um, you can like it or hate it, but that's the reality we're in. For those of us who embrace that, I think we see it as an incredible opportunity to dream big dreams and build big bridges and direct tunnels.
I love that, and I will say this: there was it's really tough to think about how you foresee the future, right? And it's always hard to see the things that we have held so dear fall away in the advance, in the face of advancement. And at the same time, there is so many opportunities to see amazing things done. I'm a huge Top Gear fan, British only, right? That was, and that was, that for me was a wonderful piece to think about the evolution. I love the engineering piece. I love all the like seeing the move to electric cars and how the world changed. There's a great episode that they shot back in the 2000s where they went out to this place called the Millau Viaduct. It was a beautiful bridge. It was built in France, and when they talked about the beauty of it, right, it was amazing because they used it as an opportunity to showcase how we could build something that was not only functional but beautiful, right? And I remember one of the hosts saying, "It's not just about building; it's about pushing human achievement. It's showing that what we can do today and taking it to what we can do tomorrow." And he related it to supercars and the idea that, we build these amazing machines not because we're trying to get from here to the grocery store, but because they're marvels of engineering. And sometimes the beauty of human achievement is the ability to do that. But I view AI in a very similar way. AI will be a tool that allows us to push the bounds of human achievement, just like the computer did, just like the internet did, just like the car has. And every time we push those bounds, while the first people through the wall are often bloodied, we do start to unlock the keys to a better society. And I'm a big fan of the Star Trek, not Star Wars future, in that the more we can push ourselves to use these tools for the greater betterment of folks, the more it actually provides this opportunity to pull together and work together to build the society that we're trying to build. And I think, it gives me a lot of hope when I hear folks like you talking about that connection that it allows us to provide, that ability to actually enhance the humanity of what we're doing in a classroom with those tools. As much as it's hard to see certain things fall away, there's also a beauty to that future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've struggled for so many generations with the concept of really understanding what other human beings understand, right? If you think about the assessment conundrum, we spend incredible amounts of time with young people, it doesn't matter if they're young or old, with other people trying to get them to understand something. And then to understand whether they understood it, we give them a test. And now we've interrupted learning. The test is not aligned with what we actually taught them or what we hope they learn. We have students who are bad test takers. It's a bad day for them. I mean, all of the things that we hate about tests, that imagine a world where assessing is part of learning and teaching. It's not a separate activity called a test. And I think that's the opportunity that DeweyLearn uh, creates. It's the notion that from the actual digital exhaust of the activity of teaching and learning, we will know more about the progress of learners and teachers than we ever could before. The other thing is that, if you think about the technology of the test, well, it's well suited to test very mechanical binary outcomes, right? Do you know what 4 plus 3 is? Can you solve this quadratic equation? Rather than the things that we're really interested in, which is, do you have persistence? You talked about persistence early on. Um, are you a lifelong learner? Do you have a passion about the things that you're learning? Do you understand how to collaborate with other people? Are you creative? Are you a leader? Those are the kinds of things that these new AI technologies can help humans understand about humans in a way that we could never before. And I think to your point about, Star Trek versus Star Wars, I do hope that paves the way for humans to actually be more human, that humanity can evolve, thanks to, I mean, sounds very ironic in a certain way or paradoxical, but I think machines can help us be more human. Um, and that's the outcome that we at DeweyLearn are trying to advance. Not everyone, I should say, who is developing the new AI technologies shares that vision. There is a great deal of work out there focused on how we replace human activity. We think AI actually is the ultimate augmenter of humanity at the end of the day.
Yeah, I listen. No disagreement here. I think that the humanity of the classroom, the ability to help give kids the tools to persist, whether they're enrolled, enlisted, or employed, and to maximize their talent and potential and allow them to be seen, allow them to find the right pathways, and use AI as a way to break down instructional needs, break down communication barriers, right? I mean, we think about the gatekeeping that goes into, for instance, how do I go to college? Well, the fact that a parent going to college is still the number one predictor that you're going to go to college is a information asymmetry. It's not a it's a preventable problem, right? I think the idea that we can build CTE with rigor, we can use modern tools and equip kids so they're yeah, you're right. You're probably not going to code up today. You're probably thinking about doing something else, right? But, if I'm going on to a Kanban plant for a Toyota manufacturer that's now using AI and robotics, right? My need for robust science and math is pretty high. By the way, also ELA, because being able to think about communication and need is also a big part of it. So it excites me because I think there's a whole new world out there if we start thinking creatively about what we're doing. That, to your point, keeps the humanity and the human endeavor that we're working on. Well, I'm going to end with my favorite question, which is, in a world right now where we see budget uncertainty, lots of change, lots of push, concern, what is it that gives you hope as an educator?
It's a great question, Matt. I mean, I think what gives me hope is that we as humans have developed a technology like these large language models, this AI. It is an expression, as much as we think of it as a technical achievement, it is, but it's also an expression of human aspiration that predates computers. The concept of artificial intelligence is not actually, there's no technical definition of artificial intelligence. It's not a computer concept. Frankenstein was an artificial intelligence. There was a Greek demigod from the 5th century called Talos that was a mythical automaton that had human level of intelligence. It's only since the 1950s that we've thought of of artificial intelligence as being an outcome of computing and computer technology. But the fact that we've been able to achieve this through human innovation is really a testament to our belief and our conviction that there is something greater out there than what humans are capable of natively, and that the future of our evolution is really through our ability, our unique ability as a species on this planet to produce technologies that augment our own abilities. We are the only species that does that, and we're achieving that in a way that is breathtaking. And my hope is that that at the end of the day, for all of the complexity in our current context, politically, culturally, socially, that our humanity will prevail, and that we will be able to use these sorts of technologies to make ourselves better as a civilization. And I'm very hopeful because I've met so many people in the AI field who share that sense of responsibility and opportunity. And you hear all the noise in the news, but many of us are working for a better future for all humans as a result of this technology. And that's what makes me excited and wake up every day feeling like we're on the right side of history here.
A sincere amen to that. A sincere amen. Well, Luyen, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for joining. This is really exciting. The work you all are doing at DeweyLearn is pushing the world forward in some ways that I think are incredible. For all of you, I want to thank our listeners, of course. Season 2, another episode in the books. If you want to hear more, podcast.betterlesson.com. Luyen, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
That wraps another episode of the Lessons Learned podcast. Thank you for listening. For show notes and more about Better Lesson, please visit betterlesson.com/podcast. Lessons Learned is hosted by Better Lesson, the leading provider of data-driven, high-impact, system-wide K-12 teaching and learning solutions. We partner with states and districts to support every educator in developing the next generation of resourceful, compassionate, and resilient learners who are college and career ready. Our work has impacted more than 80,000 educators and nearly 3 million students nationwide. See you in the next episode.